I will say though that like with any new innovation, right? We saw it with voice 5, 6 years ago. We saw it with omni-channel kind of marketing and account-based marketing. The HubSpot really kind of kicked that off a little bit earlier than that. So there have been a lot of kind of tools and I think tricks and gimmicks that people have had. But I think at the core, over the last, let's say, decade that I've seen in sales, the human in the loop function, I think, is still critical. There have been so many companies that have come out that, hey, we'll automate the sales process. You don't need sales reps anymore, founder-led sales, all that. And what ends up happening is just the quality goes down, the leads don't get a response time in minutes, things like that. So I think the big emerging thing that I've seen with folks who are using AI right is just taking the team that they have and then amplifying it by 10 and just with what AI can allow them to cover more ground.
Today's guest is Thomas Roper. Thomas is the head of go-to-market at Advantage Partners. Thomas, it's lovely to have you. Please tell us more about yourself and what you guys do.
Happy to be here. So like you mentioned, Thomas Roper, leading business development and go-to-market at Advantage Partners. We are a CPA firm, but we focus on doing those security audits that lean technology teams and startups tend to need. We work primarily with companies under 200 full-time employees and help them navigate compliance everywhere from assurance services like SOC 2, HIPAA, ISO 27001, but also on the advisory side. Say you're a founder with you and your co-founder and you need to get a SOC 2 type 2 audit. How do you do that? How do you go from square one when you're kind of in that garage phase? And so we help them navigate that with our advisors as well. We do things a little differently than some of the other traditional audit firms in the space in that all of our auditors are actually on staff rather than outsourcing it. And so because of that, we're able to, I think, keep security a little bit more in-house, but also I think move at a velocity you don't really see with some of our other competitors. So every week we're talking to new interesting technology companies. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. How did you get into the tech space and into sales and go-to-market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, my interest in technology actually started in high school. I was in an AV television production class, and I guess, kind of the Macintosh was maybe my gateway drug, but working on Final Cut and things like that, I really appreciated it. I went to film school at Full Sail, wanted to be a filmmaker, graduated around 2008, so that really wasn't a possibility. And so my second interest at the time was technology, and I ended up working some retail gigs at Best Buy, and then an Apple store was kind of my gateway into enterprise grade technology, where I actually got promoted to go over to corporate at Cupertino and work on the app review program. There, I got to work one on one with developers, helping them get onto the App Store and kind of turn the reputation of the app review process around, more of a consultative collaboration relationship rather than kind of a highway cop. And so helping these developers navigate the app review guidelines, but also just helping them make the most of the human interface guidelines. So I got to work a lot with developers, understand what are their pain points and things like that. And since then, really have just been working with startups over the last decade to just solve their problems. I'm a sales guy at heart. I enjoy working with people and solving problems. And so really over the last 7 years, I've focused primarily on that go-to-market growth function, especially at SaaS firms, just figuring out who your customer is, how do we get them to engage, how do we get them into the funnel, and then ultimately convert them into revenue.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun and you've been doing it for a while now. So I'm curious to know, what have you seen? Like, how have things changed since you initially got into sales as far as like strategy or tool sets? And, now
Mhm.
with, AI being the only thing anybody can talk about in the business world, how have you incorporated AI tools or technologies into your outbound and go-to-market approach?
Well, AI has been a huge boon, I think, on the content creation side because you're just one rep can produce really 6 months worth of content in about a day if you just really sit in front of ChatGPT and know what you're doing with tools like that. I will say though that like with any new innovation, right? We saw it with voice 5, 6 years ago. We saw it with omni-channel kind of marketing and account-based marketing. The HubSpot really kind of kicked that off a little bit earlier than that. So there have been a lot of kind of tools and I think tricks and gimmicks that people have had. But I think at the core, over the last, let's say, decade that I've seen in sales, the human in the loop function, I think, is still critical. There have been so many companies that have come out that, hey, we'll automate the sales process. You don't need sales reps anymore, founder-led sales, all that. And what ends up happening is just the quality goes down, the leads don't get a response time in minutes, things like that. So I think the big emerging thing that I've seen with folks who are using AI right is just taking the team that they have and then amplifying it by 10 and just with what AI can allow them to cover more ground. Before that, I think marketing has kind of changed where 10 years ago you had sales and you had marketing. They were very separate. Marketing, maybe put together a PDF one pager for a SaaS company, and that was what they did that week. But now very much sales is an extension of marketing and also vice versa. And so really the most successful organizations have been ones that have been able to integrate the two departments. And so rather than having just account executives taking calls, they're also creating content. They're also holding webinars. They're going to conferences. They're talking with folks on podcasts and things like that to just amplify the message. I used to have an old boss who said it's about being a good neighbor, right? When you have a good neighbor who knows how to solve problems and fix things, you tend to bring them more problems and you go to that person. And so I think if you can act like that in a business setting, even when you go to a different firm and you're selling something else, I've had prospects come to me on LinkedIn, hey, Thomas, you sold me that thing years ago. I'm trying to now solve this problem. Do you know anybody who can help? So I think when you take that smart neighbor approach, you end up building a kind of Rolodex of leads for life rather than just I think just closing the sale and moving on. So those are kind of the changes that I've seen that reps, especially with all the kind of ebb and flow of the economy and things like that, they've just built a book of business that is, regardless of where they go, keeping in touch with folks and keeping that human in the loop.
Wow, yeah, that's that well said. I think a lot of sales reps don't think about that. And I think part of it is because at a lot of early stage tech companies, it's hard to like create success. A lot of it is dependent on the product and to your point, like how well sales is integrated with marketing and how much they're creating content and sharing information. And I think that the sales rep's ability to succeed at early stage tech companies is harder than ever these days. And so I think a lot of people are like they're starting at one type of company and they build contacts for that like let's call it like HR tech offering, and then the next
Mhm.
thing they know they go to like a MarTech company or something else. So they're not able to pull those contacts with them necessarily. So it's really I think really important for people to try to this isn't really like career advice or anything, but if you can like carve out a space for you that really works, like make it work in that space, and then you can take that Rolodex with you and build trust with people, and you can always sell people multiple things multiple times over the years. So I think that's kind of an art that has been lost more recently, at least in my purview.
No, I think it has been. I think a lot of folks, especially over the decade, we've seen like LinkedIn emerge. So it's very easy, I think, to find out who are the founders running companies under 100 employees in the United States in the healthcare space. LinkedIn can run that query with a subscription. So it makes it easier to find those folks. But I think where a lot of early reps or reps that are getting into SaaS sales or tech sales now struggle is that they approach it like a sales rep. How can I sell you the software? Here's how it solves that problem instead of asking questions at the beginning, right? It goes back to kind of that cheesy MBA school, sell me the pen, right? Ask questions. What are you doing today? What's keeping you up at night? But also, I think being that evangelist that, hey, I'm not just here to solve you that HR SaaS problem. I want to create a relationship here. I want to solve and make sure that we're working together for the tenure that I'm at this company. And then let's say 5 years later, I go to, a MarTech company or something like that. Great. Kirsten, I want to keep in touch. Let's, I know you're leading HR there. What are you guys doing from a marketing perspective, right? Having that, I think a colleague who called it three-dimensional chess approach. Even when a lead says no, thinking how can you turn this into maybe an opportunity for one of your other leads who needs a developer or something like that. So I think don't always just look at it for what it is. I think look at what the possibilities can be with that relationship.
Yeah, yeah. Again, well said. When it comes to what you and your team are doing now, what's your prime network aside, Rolodex aside, what's your primary method or methods for sourcing new opportunities?
Yeah, so Advantage Partners, what we've done is really focus on two things. One, education. So we run events, webinars, office hours, helping again those founders just from square one. How do you get your SOC 2 or HIPAA or ISO certification? But then we also have a lot of partnerships. So our two co-founders, Andrew and James, were previously at Vanta, and Vanta is a platform that helps automate a lot of compliance for technology companies under like a couple thousand employees. And so what they've been able to do is partner very closely with Vanta so that as customers onboard with this large piece of software that does make their lives easier, like with anybody who buys Salesforce or any great piece of software, you take it out of the box and there's that moment. I think especially for a founder who's maybe only got two employees, you're still in that startup phase going, okay, where do I go from here? And so we kind of act as advisor in their back pocket. And so Vanta introduces them to us and we introduce obviously startups to Vanta as well. So the partnership angle has been something we've doubled down on over the last couple months, and it's been hugely successful because again, we're just having relationships with the Vanta reps, making sure that they're successful, but then also making sure that we're going out into the market and bringing leads to them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and partnerships are another great route. Vanta is a big, well-known, respected institution, so it's, fantastic that you can go to market with them. In terms of kind of scaling pipeline, um, and aside from partnerships, what are some of the other things that you're doing? So you mentioned content, education. Are
Mhm.
you, and you mentioned LinkedIn, are you and the team sending like cold emails? Are you doing any like multi-channel, multi-step sequences, cold calling, experimenting with any tools?
Oh, absolutely. Not so much experimenting with tools. I think we're still pretty young to kind of take the gamble on, some cool emerging tool that might not pay off. Right now, we're leveraging a pretty traditional sales enablement stack. Again, we're doing that cold outreach with the emails. We're doing A/B testing. What I will say is a lot of folks that I've seen can fall into the trap of just creating a lot of content, but they don't look at how that content is going to trigger the prospect to move into your funnel. It's very easy. I've been there in front of outreach, going through your tasks, sending your emails, making your phone calls, and you kind of go, "What? I've sent this guy like 8 emails. Should I really still be bugging him? I have not heard from him at all." And so I think the AI, what I try to encourage teams to do, especially our team, is AI allows you to create a lot of that content. So once you've done your homework and you figure out, okay, this is what that founder needs, this is where their company's at, this is the funding they just exited, plugging that into the tool, I think can create some really engaging content, but it's not falling into the trap of just, well, I've got a list of 1,000 folks. Let me just put our services and prices into the chat GPT and then get content out. I think you've got to make sure it's the right content at the right time. Education wise, what I would say is those account based marketing fundamentals are really solid. They still hold up, even though folks now I think are opting out of social media and kind of email lists at a little higher rate. Folks are a little more privacy conscious, which is good. It's a great thing. I think still doing that cold outreach that's meaningful rather than just, hey, here's a cool service, we'd love to help, but instead, what are you guys working on? Hey, I understand you're leading an organization. I would love to understand, you guys just launched product X. How's it going? What's keeping you up at night? And a lot of times leaders are pretty open about what's bugging them, right? I get too many damn emails, right? That's their response or something. And you can go, okay, I can work with that. Maybe I need to reach out via phone. Maybe I need to think of sending over some content, for example. And content, I think, has also evolved. 10 years ago, content was something that I think you could send a one-page PDF brochure and folks were fine with that. But I think now a lot of that gets deleted. I think your content needs to be actionable. One of the agencies that I worked for, one of the frameworks that we had, which was enormously successful, was an RFP template. Because a lot of directors, managers, VPs will tell someone, hey, we need to do an RFP. I want 30 vendors ready in the next month to go through this process. And most of us would go, okay, how do I scope this? What are the goals of the project? Well, as an agency, because we would get so many RFPs, we built a framework. And so not only from a utility perspective could we share that with folks who maybe came to us with an idea, but we could also win from an SEO perspective because what were most folks doing? Going to Google and going, how do I make an RFP? And so I think if you can think of those pieces of content, we call them mouse traps, but I don't really like that analogy. But if you actionable content that goes beyond just a brochure that helps me as a founder figure out how to do my better job faster, cheaper, better. I'm going to want to talk to you, even if we don't align on pricing, right? I'm going to walk away from that engagement and see you as an expert. So when I do have that pricing, or maybe down the road when prices do align and you come back and engage with me, we can do business. So I think, again, when I talk about these terms like content, it's very easy, I think, to look at the table stakes of what everybody's doing. But look at like HubSpot is a really good example of just great content. They put out so many blog pieces, and the blogs aren't even just text. Sometimes they're quizzes. Sometimes they're downloadable PDFs that you can send back to them that helps their team understand the scope of your initiative, while at the same time informing you on what a go forward might look like. So I would say a lot of folks should look at the HubSpot creating content that's actionable. I think that's been successful. We've done some of that, but it's an iron triangle. More to come in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, HubSpot's content playbook I think is top notch. They've really paved the way. Like whenever I have a question about business development, systems, writing
Mm-hmm.
cold email, like HubSpot's one of the first places I look. So and they've been doing it for so long too. It's like
Mm-hmm.
they're just top of mind in that space. So is that part of your strategy, is to just like be top of mind for when somebody needs, like one of these CPA firms needs security or needs like SOC 2 and compliance? Or I mean, it sounds like that's part of it, but are you also trying to use personalization as a part of your strategy? And the reason I ask about that is because I think there's a lot of tension around the idea of personalization. Some people are like, oh, you need to personalize everything, every note you send, every LinkedIn message. It's hard to do at scale. And just because you use like, dynamic tokens that like can dynamically insert first name, job title, company name, like that's not really personalization. But then on the other side is like, some people don't care if you like went to the same college as them or you like live in the same
Correct.
town. They're more problem focused, and they are likely more likely to respond if you hit them at the right time with, hey, you probably have this problem, I have a solution. So I know that was like a long-winded question, but kind of what's your approach given all these different dynamics?
I so in those situations where somebody says, well, let's just do mass automation or let's do personalization, I say, why not both, right? I think the best products, the best services marry the both so well. I think you cannot spend 10 minutes on every email for every prospect, that you're not going to get anything done. At the same time, those tokens, yeah, we can usually tell because when you extract the data from ZoomInfo or whatever, the formatting's off, right? So my last initial will be in part of my first name. Like we see all that stuff. What I would say is kind of a marriage of the two. I think spelling errors, like things like that, sure, they don't look good, but I don't think a prospect's necessarily going to say, not worth my time. I
Yeah.
think it's, what are you talking about? I personally am not a fan of the sports hometown connection unless it's a real, like, oh my goodness, Phil. I worked for Phil for 10 years. I don't really see value there. I've seen it work. So again, it's that's part of sales, is keep knocking, figuring out what's going to work. So I don't like to necessarily dismiss something, right? But I do think when you're kind of figuring out how to devour the whale, taking a step back, what is the purpose of your product or service? What are you solving for? Is it just you do it at a cheaper rate? Great. If that is it, then position your messaging around that. But I think when you take a step back, a lot of these SaaS companies, they're disrupting an existing provider. They are doing something a little differently. Maybe they're doing something in a gray area where isn't really well defined. In those instances, I think step back, what are the concerns? And what the nice thing about this is, you already have founders at your company. You already have the kind of ICPs you're looking for usually in your company, right? You have HR leaders, you have a VP of technology or a CTO. Having that conversation, it's not easy, but everybody taking a step back and looking at, okay, what are my priorities as a leader? Well, I want to make goal. Okay, you want to make goal. How do you make goal? Well, generate more revenue, make things easier. Work through that process and kind of work backwards from what your prospect needs to you. And then you will understand the data or the content you need to create. For example, using that RFP template, right? As an agency, I didn't want to talk to interns or analysts. Those people weren't decision makers, but that's who usually were reaching out and downloading the content. Now, if you took that to somebody and said, hey, look, our piece of content that took me a few hours to make last week got 10,000 views and 4,000 downloads, but they're all analysts at big fours and other companies. I think that's successful. Some leaders would say, no, that the whole campaign was a failure. But because we got that content in those organizations and because that propagated, we were able to do a lot of business with a lot of key players because their analysts were bringing them our template and they were going, oh, okay, the agency's name is at the top. Let's go. So I think, again, doing both, because again, you can't spend 10 minutes on every email. You have to figure this out. And this was something when I was in app review, figuring out that marriage between getting a ton of work done and making sure that everybody walked away from every engagement or read every email and felt like, hey, this was a human being. They're helping us. And you're gonna make mistakes. And that's something too. I think you got to fail fast. A/B test. There's a lot of tools in Outreach, Apollo that make it very easy for you, but still have that review. I'd say weekly. Marketing or sales should be going through outbound content. What are you guys putting out there? What are we talking about? What's resonating? Looking at open rates, looking at engagement rates. Open rates don't mean what they used to anymore as well. With the changes Apple and Google made, things like that. They're not bad, but I think they're more like which way the wind is blowing rather than what direction we should go in. Engagement's key. That's usually what I look at, is how many people downloaded, how many people, clicked through, engaged with what, filled out a form. Those are kind of the big triggers. But yeah, I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that helped.
Yeah, no, it did. And you mentioned a couple of tools in there, Apollo, Outreach. Are those some of the tools in your tool stack? What does that look like?
Yeah, so can't really speak to our specific tool stack, but I can speak to what I've used across the career and what I've seen be successful. Again, data isn't what it used to be. I think 5, 6 years ago, if we were having this conversation, I would say, look, ZoomInfo is the Coca-Cola of sales enablement. Buy it, and you're good. The data is not what it used to be. And a lot of people are opting out of social media, or they're being a little bit more private with things like addresses and phone numbers and things. So I know that ZoomInfo has this cool, what is it? It's like a signature scraping tool. So that's, I think, helped get a lot of cell phones and kind of keep a lot of the phone data relevant. But I think you're going to see a lot of bounces now. Just, I think anytime you're buying data, I don't buy lists either. Years and years and years ago, I was suspicious of lists. I don't buy lists. I know you founders will get these emails. Hey, I've got a list of 10,000 buyers. I don't usually see much success from those. ZoomInfo, Apollo, there are a couple other tools. What is it, like Sales Rocket or something like that. They're pretty successful, but they're all kind of pulling data from the same place. So I wouldn't stress too much about the actual data. You're going to see some bounces. The big things that I would say is leveraging an outbound tool that's going to allow you to do things at scale, like an Outreach is a really good example. A lot of them are leveraging AI tools on top. It's fine. I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, the AI is kind of all coming from the same place. There's only really like 2 or 3 vendors, right? So I don't really see much of a difference. So I wouldn't make a sales decision based off of the AI. Intent data is another thing that I think a lot of founders get caught in. It sounds better because, oh, well, great, I'm using intent data. Of course, these people are going to buy from me. And I found intent data to be kind of right half of the time. The big things that I would say is getting leads, understanding your leads journey is really important that I think a lot of teams don't focus on early on. Making sure that your SLA in responding to leads and responding to any question really a prospect has through the sales journey in minutes. A lot of teams I see will have like an SLA of hours and stuff like that. When I joined Advantage Partners from the start, I was like, our SLA for leads needs to be 5 minutes. We want to do business with folks, and so there should be no reason why we can't respond. And so I think a lot of teams, 3 hours, 6 hours, it's like, no. Because by then they're already on a demo call with somebody else. So I think your SLAs need to be in minutes in terms of sales. And then I would say, yeah, I think a really good tool that I've really enjoyed using, and I think pretty much anybody in SaaS sales should get, is LinkedIn Sales Nav. It's a little bit on the pricey side. Everybody's in LinkedIn. I mean, go to I have a friend, he teaches at a university, and he says every kid before they get to college now has a LinkedIn account, which means if they keep that through their college journey and then when they get their first job, it really has snowballed. And I think just LinkedIn Sales Nav is kind of the best first tool for a team to get in terms of sales enablement, because you can send emails and all of that. I think the outreach and stuff can come as revenue comes in, but Sales Nav would probably, I think, be my first tool, and then maybe something like a HubSpot or a Salesforce to organize your leads, because that's another pitfall of teams when they're kind of building out their pipeline, is they'll use an Excel spreadsheet or something, and just it just gets apples fall off the cart. So I think getting your CRM in early and building out, what are our products, what are the triggers that need to happen when certain products are sold, I think is worth its weight in gold earlier rather than later.
Yeah, yeah. And having a CRM, even if you're only talking to a handful of people, is crucial because you're going to talk to more and you got to track everything. You need to log those conversations. So even if you're starting with something free, like the free version of, I don't know, Pipe Drive or think there's a couple others out there. Not the best tool, but better than a spreadsheet for sure. Well, last question for you, Thomas. When you think about growth and you think about where you are today and where you want to be in the next 6 to 12 months, what's top of mind? What's on the radar? What are you hoping to achieve between now and then?
The next year, I'm really digging the CPA security space. It kind of has me back to my app review days where I'm working with a business, really 2 to 3 businesses every day, just helping them solve problems. Compliance isn't the sexiest thing, but I'm enjoying it. I would say kind of longer term, I think it would be a lot of fun. I've done my own consulting. I think it might be fun to one day build an agency and just do this with a couple of other folks because there, I think the startup scene, even with the economy the way it is, I think it's going to explode. And what we saw in like 2010 is going to get dwarfed here in the next 15 years. I I'm looking forward to it. So I think helping these founders build their sales process, and I also think with AI, a lot of things. I think there are going to be things like developer count, and stuff like that. You used to have to hire, X number of developers to get a product shipped. Now with AI, you can cover some of that ground sooner. But I think sales is one of those areas where I haven't met a founder that is willing to automate their sales process entirely. They always want an account executive. So it's got some security in it. So for any of the college folks listening, or any of the folks who I think are thinking about sales long term, I think it's got a lot of security in it.
Yeah, I agree completely. I know someone that launched an AI cold caller and they're like, oh, this is going to be great. Like, we're going to save so much time and so much money. And if you listen to the calls, it's like people are like, are you an AI? And like the accent goes from American to Australian. And then like some of the tonality around some words like shoots up or drops. So it's like, yeah, it makes me feel like salespeople are going to be around a lot longer than some of the other positions out there that AI is allegedly coming for.
Yeah, and I think to kind of speak to that, it just kind of being somewhat older, I guess, on the tech side, maybe officially old in the tech scene, but going through voice like 5, 6 years ago, and how voice was going to transform everything. I had a leader I worked with at the time, and I mean, he wrote a book about voice and how voice was just our lives are going to be like Star Trek, right? You'll walk into your home and talk to it like the computer on the Enterprise. And what we found was this big explosion of this new technology. Voice was everywhere, right? People were buying those Echo Dots and whatnot, and then it started to kind of recede, right? We no longer asked our voice assistant for the status of our laundry, or all these kind of little things, but voice still exists for play music or start a timer, or people talk to their cars, and things like that. So again, I think it finds its niche. And so I think AI is in that explosive phase right now where everybody's like, oh my goodness, we don't even need humans anymore. We can just use AI, right? And I think it's going to recede back, and we're going to, oh, we actually do need accountants. We can't trust the computer with payroll. My goodness, right? So I think it will recede, but a lot of the drum beating around like job replacement stuff, I don't think is again, it's not really intelligence, large language model stuff. So I think people should rest assured with that. But I think it's kind of, we see these things like voice, and before voice it was apps, right? Everything was going to be an app. We weren't going to have a desktop anymore, right? Laptops, desktop, all passe. We'll all be on tablets. Well, turns out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, true. Awesome. Well, Thomas, this has been a lot of fun. It's been great having you. If anyone wants to get in touch, learn more about you and more about Advantage Partners, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Advantage Partners, we are advantage-partners.com. We love talking to any founders that are looking to navigate compliance, or if they just need some help. We also offer VCSO services. So if you're just looking to get compliance completely off your plate, we can do that as well. And then if you want to find me on LinkedIn, I'm Thomas Roper. Yeah, feel free to send over a connection request. And yeah, I love growing the network and talking with folks, especially those that are working on interesting projects. Across my career, I've worked in direct fiber to the home, app development, compliance. I've even done some e-commerce, like fraud protection stuff. So I've really been around, and it's just great. All of that's just through networking and getting to know folks and working on interesting things.
Awesome. Well, hopefully someone reaches out.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.